So for MCP Flexion, the stationary arm is the dorsal aspect of the metacarpal, the fulcrum is the dorsal aspect of the joint, and the moving arm is the dorsal aspect of the proximal phalange. So we'll start by taking the patient through the passive range of motion. Then we'll line up the gonio like this. Try to get the reading there. And you have about 95 degrees of flexion. So normal is 0 to 90 on the radial side, 0 to 135 on the ulnar side. So for MCP extension, the stationary arm is the palmar aspect of the metacarpal. The palmar aspect of the joint is the fulcrum, and the palmar aspect of the phalange is the moving arm. So do the passive range of motion first, just trying to extend that joint as much as you can. I'm going to line up the goni here and try to go through the motion. Have about 35 degrees. Normal is 0 to 45. For PIP Flexion, the stationary arm is the dorsal aspect of the proximal phalange. The dorsal aspect of the joint is the fulcrum, and the dorsal aspect of the middle phalange is the stationary arm, the moving arm. So do the passive range first, just trying to bend that finger as much as you can. Lining up the goniometer here, and trying to bend as much as you can. Have about 85 degrees of flexion. Normal is 0 to 90 on the radial side, 0 to 135 on the ulnar side. For DIP Flexion, the stationary arm is the dorsal aspect of the middle phalange, the fulcrum is the dorsal aspect of the joint, and the moving arm is the dorsal aspect of the distal phalange. So you're just going to flex the finger as much as you can there. Lining up the goniometer here, and take the patient through the range of motion. We have about 70 degrees of flexion. Normal is 0 to 70/80. So for DIP extension, the stationary arm is the palmar aspect of the middle phalange. The palmar aspect of the joint itself is the fulcrum, and the palmar aspect of the distal phalange is the moving arm. So we're just going to extend just like this, passively. Try to line up the goni here. And we have right about 22 degrees of extension. Normal is 0 to 30. So for MCP abduction and adduction, the stationary arm is the dorsal aspect of the metacarpal here. The fulcrum is the dorsal aspect of the joint, and the dorsal aspect of the first phalange is the moving arm. So we have the hand flat like this. We'll try to move the other fingers out of the way. We'll start by finding 0, which is right there. We'll go all the way out to one side. We have about 20 degrees of motion. Back to 0. And then we'll try to go all the way to the other side. We have another 20 degrees of motion there. So total arc of motion, we got 0 to 40 degrees. Normal is 0 to 45 degrees. So for thumb CMC Flexion, the stationary arm is the midline of the radius here. The fulcrum is the trapezium, right here at the base of the thumb. And the moving arm is the first metacarpal. So first, we'll have the thumb right against the hand like this, and that's how we're going to measure our 0. So if we line this up here, we're starting, our 0 is 30 degrees. So then if I bring the thumb into full flexion like this, we started at 30 degrees and we're now at 5. So the total motion was 25 degrees. Normal for CMC Flexion is supposedly 0 to 50. For CMC Extension, you find 0 the same way, with the thumb right at the side of the hand. So we're starting again here at 30 degrees. And then if we fully extend the thumb like this, we go to about 50 degrees. So we have 20 degrees of motion, and normal for CMC Extension is 0 to 20 degrees. For thumb CMC Abduction, the stationary arm is the aspect of the second metacarpal. The radial styloid process is the fulcrum, and the first metacarpal is the moving arm. So we're going to measure 0 with the thumb resting up against the palm. So our 0 is we're starting at roughly 25 degrees. And then if we go out into full abduction here, we are now at 45 degrees. So we had 20 degrees of total motion, so 0 to 20 degrees. Normal for abduction is supposedly 0 to 70. So for thumb MCP Flexion, the dorsal aspect of the joint is the stationary arm. The dorsal aspect of the metacarpal is the stationary arm. Dorsal aspect of the joint is the fulcrum, and the dorsal aspect of the first phalange is the moving arm. So we'll line up the goni here, go into flexion just like this, and we have, that is about 65 degrees of flexion. Normal is 0 to 75. For thumb IP Flexion, the stationary arm is the dorsal aspect of the first phalange. The dorsal aspect of the joint is the fulcrum, and the dorsal aspect of the distal phalange is the moving arm. So we'll line up the goni here, flex as best you can, and we have roughly 80 degrees of flexion. Normal is 0 to 80/90. So for thumb IP Extension, the palmar aspect of the first phalange is the moving stationary arm. The palmar aspect of the joint is the fulcrum, and the palmar aspect of the distal phalange is the moving arm. So we're going to try to line up the goni here, try to get as much extension as we can. We got about 35 degrees. Normal is 0 to 30.